So a couple of months ago, a fellow designer reached out on Dribble and they asked me to give them some feedback on their company's website showing time. I was really humbled. The reason they reached out was I'd done a similar redesign, like a concept redesign for a similar website, and so he thought I might have some good insights. But anyways, I ended up giving him some feedback, and I think they actually made a few changes based off of that feedback, which is humbling, like I said. But as I thought about it, I thought it'd be a cool idea to kind of put my own take on this header and send that to them. And if they want to use it, that's fine. And if not, well, maybe this is the fun tutorial for us to kind of geek out on. So what I did in the following video, so I'm recording this at the end, is this. So it looks pretty different from what they have currently. And we're going to do the redesign in Sketch and then develop it in Webflow. I think the Webflow development takes only 16 minutes or so, and the redesign takes a little bit longer. So if you're interested, strap yourself in and let's get started. And I've already tried to recreate the website here as closely as possible. And I basically have one goal with this redesign, and that is to drive all of the attention to this area, the H1 headline tag. And the reason for that is because when a new user who doesn't have a lot of experience with you comes onto your website, first you have to know that you have about 10 seconds to convince them to stay on the site. Having the navigation, of course, is important, but having it so large like this and dominant, it doesn't help them to know what the website is about. It kind of does a little bit because showing market stats and leads is giving them an intro to the categories. But you have a copy down here that is specifically targeting new users and letting them know hey, this is our product. This is the value that we can bring to you. So I want to de-emphasize this and more emphasis to this. I want to increase contrast between all of this text here and the background, and just make it feel a little bit cleaner and less condensed. All right, so let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this dark blue nav bar. I think it's a lovely color, but it's so bold and strong and it contrasts so much with the image that your eye really gravitates towards this whenever you first land on the page. And like I said, you have 10 seconds to convince new users to stay on your page, and so something this bold is stealing away precious time from that 10 seconds. All right, so we're gonna get rid of that, and we're gonna bring up the image so that it's full bleed. All right, so already just with that change, you can see that this is starting to get de-emphasized and more emphasis is coming to this. This looks like a mess because there's not enough contrast with the background yet, but we're gonna fix that. All right, next is I'm gonna change the background. I think with this image, since there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in it, it's a little busy, and it's really blown out over here, and there's lots of empty space inside the house, so it has that feeling of being a stock image. So it's not my favorite image. So I'm going to change it out. Let me find my folder. Sketch stuff, showing time, new hero. All right, so the reason I changed it out for one person is that that person's face can be larger and be more of a focal point. I like that this person is in a third of the frame. So if you've ever taken a cinematography class, it's often nice to have somebody in a third as opposed to the direct center. So a third would be here and a third would be here. So he's nicely in that third of the frame, which is great for our purposes. And the other one, it was kind of the focus is on the showing and the buyers. And what I like about this image is that the focus is on the agent. And that ultimately that's like the end user is the agent who's using this to manage their showings, not the buyers. The buyers are going to profit from it, or not profit, but they're going to benefit from it. But really it's the agents that we need to convince this is the product for you. So I don't think this is the perfect image. Like if ShowingTime wanted to use this layout that we're about to create together, I would encourage them to take their own photos and hire an actor and do something similar to this photo. But he doesn't scream real estate agent. I think he has to look the part a little bit more. But I think that it's getting across the idea of what I'm trying to communicate. Next is we're going to add a dark overlay. So I'm going to use this blue as an overlay. We're going to start off with everything at 100 and then move. And then I'm going to go over to color.adobe.com and okay. Oh geez. Okay. I'm signed in now. I'm going to enter my color. And basically I like to look for complementary colors that I can make a gradient with. I like using gradients a little bit more than I do just flat overlays because it makes the gradient feel a little bit more dynamic. So I think what I'll do is leave that at 50 and bring this down to like 70. I'm liking that. Okay, so now this, the contrast between the text and the background is now a lot crisper. Things are easy to read. So I'm liking where this is going. All right, let's work on this section up here. Let me go ahead and ungroup this and let me lock my background layer by hitting Command-Shift-L. And one thing I'm going to do is make sure that my layout settings are correct. So I'm going to make the total width 1224, gutter 30, and I center everything. All right, so now these lines represent columns, and this last column and this last column represent 1,224 pixels. Whenever you're designing a website, this is really important because a lot of times when the developer is programming the site, they will usually put in how wide the content is with a percentage, like 85% of the width, and then they'll often give a max width. So basically, I would be communicating to the developer that the max width should be 1,224. Over here on ShowingTime, I looked at with the inspector, I looked at the code, and their max is 1,080. So you can kind of tell, like, from end to end is 1,080, and it feels just a little bit narrow. Like even my MacBook is 1,440 pixels wide. So I think modern browsers, I think we can scale up a little bit from the 1,080. So the first thing I'm going to do is move this to the left. So it's right on the left edge of our container. And I'm going to make this quite a bit smaller. I'm going to make this come down to 50. It's difficult because with folks that aren't in the design field or just clients, if you're designing a website, often like the most they know about marketing or how to brand themselves is just they want the logo to be really big. And it's kind of up to us to convince them that most people don't care who you are or what your logo is. They care that what you have to offer them, the benefits that you can bring to them that or make their life easier. When you give them that benefit, they're going to associate that benefit with your logo, and then that logo will begin to mean something. So we need to decrease the size of the logo so that we can give more attention to the content that is going to bring value to the client. So like I said, it's up to us to kind of like let our clients or our companies know that. let's work on this like top nav section. First I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of these like separators, these line dividers, because I don't think they're necessary and they just add one more thing. But I am going to increase the space to something like, let's try 20. All right, so now there's 20 pixels of spacing between each one of these items. And I've got these styled as navlink small, whereas these are navlink big. And 18 is actually, 18 pixels is actually quite large for something like this. So I'm gonna just bring it down to 15 and update the text style. And just bringing those down a little bit, I think helps. All right, I'm also going to work on this button. All right, so one way that we can bring emphasis to this and to our CTA, which is request a demo, is by making sure that orange, that color, is used to accent actions we want the user to take. So by having orange in 5 places here, these 3 icons, and the CTA, we're diluting the power of this accent color and how it gives power to our CTA. So what I want to do is actually remove orange from this navigation so that this button really sticks out. All right, so I'm going to take this button and actually remove the fill and just add a white fill to it. I'm also going to remove the shadows. And right there you can tell, we're drawing more attention to this. All right, I'm also going to take away the styling and just make it look like the regular links we have to the left. And last, I'm going to change the padding using the plugin Patty. And I'm not entirely sure what I want to do, but let's just try 510. See what that looks like. Okay, I might try just a little bit taller Patty. Maybe something like 714. All right. So I'm gonna scooch this. I'm gonna actually delete that and paste it inside of this so that automatically, I'm using Anima to kind of like automatically lay it out. Scoot it over to the right hand side of our container and take the grid off. And you can see that the navigation is still visible, it's still easy to read, but it's not nearly as prominent. And by the way, I think contact sales, personally, I don't love that copy because nobody wants to contact sales. You know that when you contact sales, you're going to talk to somebody who's trying to convince you to buy something. So I would much prefer making that contact or figuring out some way else. Like request a demo, like that's basically getting you to the sales department. I don't know. My recommendation would be just to come up with something a little different. Okay. So next is I'm gonna ungroup all of this stuff. Make sure I kept the icons grouped. Okay, awesome. And I'm gonna do the same thing with these guys. I'm just gonna decrease it slightly. 28 for navigation is huge. Like usually that's like a H2 or an H3. So it's really massive and it's stealing a lot of attention away from this down here. So I understand they want it to be quite a bit bigger. So I think if we just go to say like 17 and then update the style, that'll work better. All right, let's zoom in a little bit. And I gave these icons a layer style over here so that if I make one change, I can apply that layer style to all of them. And so here's what we're gonna do. Instead of these being orange, I'm gonna make them white and slightly opaque. All right, so so just there, I feel like that's already an improvement where now the orange down here is kind of like the main the main thing on this website, and then the orange is also here in the logo, which is nice. So I think we're going in a good direction here. All right, so I'm gonna bring this over and bring this over, and I want to change the size of this a little bit. Let me bring this down to like 20 looks good. And I'm just gonna send it about 10 pixels away and just try to align it. I'm just gonna use my eye. Make this 20, bring this over and align it. And then bring this over and align it. 1, 2. I think I moved this up 2 pixels as well. Yeah. Okay, so bring this over and change this to 20. Align it. 1, 2. Okay, yeah, it's looking good. All right, so I'm going to group these, and then I'm going to use Anima to kind of create an automatic collapsing thing, and let's use 20. Let's use 20 pixels spacing, and line it up to the right hand side of this, and just send it down, maybe like 20 pixels to begin with, and we can always adjust that later. Okay, so I think just by making everything a little smaller, we're really drawing attention here. I do want to, it feels like these two are competing for attention, so I want to make this feel distinct in some way. So what I'm going to do is create basically like a wrapper around this thing. Send it to the back, like right here. We're gonna make this white, and we'll try something like 8% for now. Let's try 15. Okay, and these buttons are rounded, so just to try to be consistent, I'm gonna make this 3 pixels. And then the last thing I'm going to do is use a background blur and bring this down a little bit. And let me just have that like kind of like appley frosted look to it. Okay, and then I'm going to use Patty. So to use Patty, you have to group it. Plugins, Patty, enter padding. And let's just do like 30 pixels of padding around the side. Oh, that's way too much. Plugins, Patty. Let's try 20. Okay, yeah, that makes way more sense. Let me do one more thing. Plugins, Patty. Enter padding for selection. And I might do 15 pixels of padding top and bottom, 20 pixels at the top. Right, so I want to, let me send this to the top. I want to match where this arrow ends. There we go. With the right of the button. 1, 2. That's 30. That's 20. All right, so this is zoomed out. So this is at 100%. So this is what it would look like in the browser, and that looks great. I think this gives us enough distinction where your eye is drawn to it, but it's secondary to the orange down here. Okay, next is I want to deal with this area. So let me ungroup this, and let me just give names to stuff. We'll call this bottom nav so that I know what it is in the layer list. Top nav. And then we'll group all of these elements as nav bar. Oops, not nav bar. Before I move on from the nav bar, maybe the last thing I'll do is just look at my spacing from the top. So 34. I usually like to have a little bit more spacing. It's just personal preference. 2, 4, 5, 6, 50. So let's try like 40. And then the logo itself is aligned to the top as well. Okay. Next is, let's deal with this H1. So for large text, I really like it for it to be left aligned. For any text, I like it to be left aligned because it's just how we read things. So it's easier to have a hard edge on the left-hand side. This just makes it a lot easier to read. And I also like, I feel like we need to break this sentence up because it's really long. So I think just add an artificial break there, and let's make it left aligned. And then let's add a little bit of padding. So let's have 32, or sorry, line height is what I meant to say. 44 looks okay right now. And we're gonna go ahead and align it to the edges of our container. So let's make it, actually before I start dealing with spacing, I want to change the how big this is. It's just a little bit large for my taste. So I'll just bring it down to 48. I feel like it becomes a little bit more readable, and it lets the image just kind of have more white space. I feel like, I don't know if this is intentional, but yeah, there's no spacing here, but there's no spacing there either. So it must be like something proprietary. Okay. So I think just by bringing it down, it kind of helps. So I like 48, and then let's bring down the for the larger text, it's nicer to have a little bit of a tighter line height. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. And then 10 pixels of margin between these, and then let's do 40 pixels of margin with this supporting text. All right, now that I decrease the size of this, I need to decrease the size of this so that it's not competing. So let's try something like 24. And 24 times, let's try 1.75. No, that's too much. 24 times 1.5. Okay, perfect. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now it's 10 pixels of spacing. Okay. The last thing is, I think I want my button, the text, to match the nav link. So I'm just going to use that style, nav link large. My button should resize. And of course the padding is all wrong now, so we need to fix that in a second. But just, you know, when you have white text against saturated color, oftentimes the text can feel, it's kind of optical illusion, it can feel like it's thinner. So just by making this, just on this orange button, medium, I think that'll help to give it a little bit more presence. Okay. I also like using sentence case as opposed to the all caps. I feel like it's just a little friendlier. Okay, so let's deal with the padding issues here. So plugins, enter padding for selection. So 7 and 25. So let's do something like 15, 30, 10. So that's this is going in clockwise. So 15 pixels of margin, or sorry, padding up here, 30 pixels on either side, and then 10 pixels down here. Right. Yeah, much better. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, and then let's group this and call it hero content. And I'm just gonna vertically align it so it's in the middle, and bring it in view. And I think honestly that's it. I like how simple that we've made this. I feel like we accomplished our goal in that we're driving all of the attention to this right here. We did that by decreasing the prominence of this, making this and the logo the only elements that have orange, increasing some of the white space around the heading, increasing the contrast by adding this gradient on top of the image, changing the image so it's not as busy. And if you didn't notice, I picked an image where it has a shallow depth of focus. Sorry, I just hit mute so I could cough. And so that means that this text is going to go show nicely over this out of focus element. That's essentially what this is doing here, is it's blurring the background. And we could have, if we took this further, we could add some nice hover elements, like these icons could become orange on hover. But I like that they're transparent white and kind of immediately. And honestly, for users that this is their first visit to the website, they're not going to know what these icons mean. And so having the labels have more prominence is helpful. A house doesn't necessarily scream showings, and a briefcase doesn't necessarily scream lead. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to jump into Webflow, and we're going to develop this in Webflow and just see what it looks like and go from there. All right, guys, so to cap off a redesign of the Showing Time website, really quickly, hopefully in 20 minutes or less, we're going to develop the header in Webflow and publish it so that you can take a look. So the first thing we're going to do is add a section, change our tag to header for SEO purposes, and call it hero. Down here in the background section, we can add an image, and we're going to set it to cover, aligned from the middle, and do not tile. All right, and then with the same element selected, the hero, we're going to make the the height 100 VH, which stands for viewport height. We're just going to make sure that it fills the entire width and height of the browser. And then for the background, the last thing we're going to do is add a gradient. And I've already got our colors in here, so I can quickly make these adjustments. All right, and our background is complete. The next thing we're going to do is add our nav bar. And this is probably going to be the most complicated part of this development. I didn't add it, did it? Okay. For some reason that did not add the nav bar. It's the most complicated part because of that kind of like two navs, one that sits on top of the other. So we're going to take the nav bar and get rid of the background just by making it transparent. And one thing I like to do really quickly is create my own container so I can control the responsiveness of the website, make it a little more fine-tuned to my taste. So inside of the nav bar, we'll add a div block. And brand always goes first. We'll call it nav container. Actually, just container, sorry. And we're going to be reusing this container element across the entire website. So we want to keep it pretty lightweight. So we're going to make it 85% width and set the margin to auto, which is going to center it on the x-axis. So you can see there's 7.5% of margin here and 7.5 here. And we also want to give it a max width. Our file in Sketch was 1,224. If you remember us talking about that when we were talking about the layout, those 12 columns. Next is we're going to bring in our logo. And I want to make sure I hit high DPI so that it looks nice and crisp. And I'm going to give it a class of logo and make it a max width of 183. All right, perfect. Then with the nav bar, we could give it 40 pixels of padding in our file just to push it away from the top a little bit. I'm going to get rid of these two. And to create our two rows, we're going to use Flexbox. And so I'm going to still one in there. I'll call this top nav, and this one bottom nav. And with the nav menu selected, make it Flexbox, align to the right, and align to the top. And it's going to be vertical, sorry. Vertical, align to top, align to right. There we go. Alright, then with the nav link selected, so we're styling this piece of text here. It looks like a box because there's all this padding, so we can get rid of this. 0, 0, and add some margin here to push it away from the other ones. And right away, we can just go ahead and copy 4 of these and make this white. And I forgot to mention, Franklin URW is an Adobe font, and I could go ahead and create a kit in Adobe, link it to this Webflow project, and I could start using Franklin. But just since this is a 20-minute video, I just wanted to keep it simple, so I'm just going to be using Open Sans. Alright, and then I know that this is 15 pixels. Let's make this 1M, and I think that's it for now. Alright, so login, support, billing, and contact sales. Login, support, billing, contact sales. Alright, and then with the top nav, let's push the stuff, the bottom nav section away 20 pixels. And then we're going to use a combo class on the nav link to create kind of like the appearance of the button. So we'll do top nav button, and just give this just a little bit of padding, so that when we add our border, and then all the box elements in our design, or actually on the current website, have 3 pixels of border radius. So now that's looking kind of similar to our design. To get these to align well, we're going to use Flexbox again, and we can just center everything using this. Alright, so that's essentially the top section of our nav. And next is we're going to add our drop-down menus. So let's add a drop-down. Here it is. Alright, so the first thing we'll do is let's style our text. So we'll go ahead and make it white. Instead of 15, this one's 17, because if you remember, we wanted it to be a little bit bigger. And, oh, it's not changing the color. Okay. Oh, no worries. We'll just call this drop-down text. Actually, you know what, before I do that, let me just do the toggle. Oops. Sorry about that. With a toggle, I wonder if, perfect, okay. I wanted to do that because it changes the color of the icon as well. Alright, so then let's go ahead and get rid of all this padding. And it's going to create some confusion here because this icon has some craziness attached to it. So we're going to set the position to auto, delete that. We'll make this something like 7, and I think if we select our toggle and make it Flexbox, then everything's going to start looking normal-ish. We're going to drag the text blocks above the icon, so icon is to the right. And then the last thing we need to do is add our SVG file. So we'll do the first one is showing, so it's the little house icon, and we'll call this drop-down icon, and we'll push it away, maybe like 10 pixels away from the text, and that looks pretty darn close to what we have. Let me just make this showings. think maybe the only thing is it feels like this is a little bolder. Okay. Then with the drop down selected, I can copy and paste 3. Let's add some, not with the drop down, but with the toggle selected. We can add 20 pixels of margin, and it's going to push the other ones to the left. And then let's go ahead and replace the icons. One thing I forgot to mention is when you go into these settings, you have the opportunity to add some alt text. I definitely recommend doing that just for accessibility, and that alt text actually helps with SEO as well. All right, the last thing we need to do is with our, oh geez, I keep doing that. With the bottom nav selected, we're gonna add 20 pixels of margin to everything and give it a background of white at about 10%, I think. Yes, 10%. And it needs to have that border radius. Right, now in my file, I liked for the right edge of this icon to match with the right edge of this. I don't know, I'm kind of seeing it here live. I think I like that better. If I wanted to make those flush, what I could do is add -20 pixels of margin here, and that would push it over to the right, but I'm seeing it live, I kind of like this better. Okay. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use Flexbox to align our hero content, but that would mess up the way that our nav bar is displaying. So what I'm going to do is actually set the positioning of the hero to relative so that I can absolutely position right here the nav bar to the top. And there we go. All right, so that means that with the hero selected, I can make it flex, make it vertical, and align everything in the middle so that when I add a div block, it's going to show up right in the middle. We're going to call this container. And we're going to add our H1. And let's go ahead and copy this. Okay, so the great thing about cascading style sheets is that whenever you apply something to a parent element, it cascades down to all the children and all the grandchildren, if you will. So since all of the text in here is going to be white, if we set the text of the hero to white, it's going to make this white. That didn't work with these links because links have some overrides from the browser that change the color, but that will work just for text and paragraphs. So just by changing white in the hero, I'm just going to go ahead and change that here. And there's an artificial break here. And let's go ahead and make changes to this. So this is going to be 48 pixel font size with a line height of 60, and it is going to have a little bit of text shadow. Let's figure out what we did. 0 to 4. I know it's 20%, and it's 0 to 4. Right. Just to help it pop off the page a little bit. Then we're going to add a paragraph, and add this here. And we're going to add a combo class and just call it hero sub headline. And let's get our style. It says 2436. Oh, I forgot to get rid of this 20 pixels of margin top. And this is matching really closely already what we have here. and there's an artificial break after professionals. All right. Unless I'm mistaken, I think the last thing we need to add is our button. I think the button's at the top. Here we go. All right. So with the button selected, let's go ahead and add 40 pixels of margin to the top there. And let's get rid of the 0 here. And let's make the background our orange color right away. And we know that it has 3 pixels of corner radius. And this is going to be a request demo. And essentially this is going to match these styles up here. So it's going to be 17.1M, and instead of using light, I am going to use normal, and we need to increase the padding a little bit, so about 15:30. I'll change this to 15 and this to about 30. Okay, and then I left these stylings from the original. It has an inline and a box shadow. So with the drop shadow, it is 0230 on 20. So 0230 and 20. All right, so add just a little bit of shadow to the button, and then we need to add some inner shadow. So this is going to be 40% white. All right, it's going to come 110. So it's going to come from here. 1 0, I think maybe this. There we go. All right, so now it's got that little bit of highlight kind of in the top left corner, and that is it. So I'm not going to add any hover states or anything like that. I just wanted to kind of quickly show you guys how easy it is to come into Webflow and go ahead and make your designs match to what's actually on the web. So let me go ahead and publish this. Preview it on the web. There it is. And I will be putting this link in the video description so you guys can take a look at it. And you can even view it in Webflow so that you can see under the hood, so to speak. 2 final notes just to end the video. One is, if you noticed in the design, I gave this kind of that background blur, and I had an idea for how to achieve that using a fixed background image, and unfortunately it didn't work, and so I just left it out of the video. I love that frosted glass look, and if any of the viewers know how to accomplish that well, would love your input. But I left it out of the video for that reason. And second is, I darkened up the gradient a little bit at the top, because since this is a wider ratio, as will most laptops be, and so here it's very square, this section is kind of like superimposed over the hat and over this building. But over here it's actually superimposed over his face and the feather, and so it's getting a little bit busier. So I added a little bit of gradient darkness to the top just to help with contrast and making sure that these text blocks are easy to read. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that it was helpful to you. If it was, please subscribe so that you can get notified of future uploads, and make sure to check out the links below. Thanks, and have a good one.